1847, Nebraska territory. Autumn wind carried the sound of sobbing across the prairie. As Jeremiah Hawthorne stood beside a freshly dug grave, to crying infants in his weathered arms, his wife Constance lay beneath the cold earth, and 43 families of his wagon train waited for their leader to make the impossible choice. Winter was coming fast, and to babies meant certain death for everyone on the trail to Oregon. The auctioneer's voice would soon ring out across the camp, but fate had other plans when a mysterious woman stepped forward from the shadows. The year 1847 had been cruel. To the westward-bound settlers, disease, harsh weather, and broken axles had already claimed 12 souls from Jeremiah's wagon train since they left Independence, Missouri 5 months ago. But nothing had prepared him for losing Constance during the difficult birth of their twin sons, Ezekiel and Isaiah, just 3 days past. Now, as the morning sun cast long shadows across the Nebraska prairie, Jeremiah faced the hardest decision of his 42 years. His calloused hands trembled as he held the swaddled babies, their small faces red from crying. The other families gathered around their wagons, speaking in hushed tones about their leader's terrible predicament. "Jeremiah, you know we can't take on 2 more mouths to feed," said Cornelius Blackwood, a stern man with graying whiskers who owned the largest wagon in their group. "Winter's coming, and we barely have enough supplies as it is." The wagon train leader's jaw tightened. He had guided these families safely across rivers, through Indian territory, and over treacherous mountain passes. But now, with his wife dead, and a helpless infant in his care, he felt more lost than ever before. Martha Pemberton, a kind-hearted woman who had helped with the difficult birth, approached with tears in her eyes. "There might be families back east willing to take them in," she said softly, "good Christian folks who could give them proper homes." Jeremiah nodded slowly, though the thought of parting with his sons tore at his heart like a knife. He had responsibilities to the other families counting on him to get them safely to Oregon. Before the snows came, the twins deserved better than to perish on the trail because of his inability to care for them alone. "I'll arrange for an auction," announced Silas Goldberg, a traveling merchant who often dealt in such matters. "There are always folks looking for children, especially healthy boys like these." Word spread quickly through the camp. By afternoon, several interested parties had gathered near the largest wagon. Among them were the Weatherbys, an older couple whose own children had died of fever back in Ohio. There was also Benjamin Crane, a wealthy rancher from Kansas who needed strong boys to help work his land. Even some of the single men expressed interest, seeing potential in raising sons who would one day be valuable workers. Jeremiah tried to steel himself for what was to come. He had wrapped his wife's wedding ring in a small cloth and tucked it into each baby's blanket, the only inheritance he could give them. As he prepared to hand over Ezekiel and Isaiah, his heart felt as heavy as the approaching storm clouds. The auctioneer, a small man named Tobias Fletcher, climbed onto a wooden crate and called for attention. "Now then, folks, we have here to healthy baby boys born just 3 days ago to our wagon train leader. They're strong stock, good bloodlines, and sure to grow into fine young men." Jeremiah winced at hearing his sons described like livestock, but he remained silent. This was the way of the frontier, where survival often meant making impossible choices. "I'll start the bidding at $10 for the pair," Fletcher announced. "15, called out Benjamin Crane. 20, countered Mrs. Weatherby Dodd as the bidding continued. A figure emerged from behind one of the distant wagons. It was a woman, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair pulled back under a worn bonnet. She wore a simple gray dress and carried herself with quiet dignity. Most of the travelers had never seen her before, which was strange since their wagon train had been together for months. The woman approached the auction slowly, her eyes fixed on the crying infants in Jeremiah's arms. There was something in her expression that made several people step back and take notice. "Excuse me," she said in a clear, steady voice that carried across the gathering. "I believe there's been a mistake." Fletcher paused mid-sentence, his hammer raised. "Ma'am, if you want to bid, you need to speak up proper." The mysterious woman shook her head. "I'm not here to bid. I'm here to prevent a terrible wrong from Being done, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cornelius Blackwood stepped forward, his face flushed with irritation. "Now see here, lady, nobody asked for your opinion. This is a private matter among the folks in our train. My name is Temperance Goodwin." The woman replied calmly, "And I've been traveling alongside your wagons for the past 2 weeks, though I've kept to myself." Jeremiah looked up sharply. He prided himself on knowing every soul in his charge. Yet this woman was completely unfamiliar to him. "I don't recall accepting you into our group." "Ma'am," Temperance smiled sadly, "that's because I never officially joined. I've been following behind, staying just far enough away to avoid notice, you see. I lost my own family to cholera back in St. Louis, and I've been searching for a new purpose ever since." She gestured toward the babies. "When I heard about your wife's passing and your intention to auction these children, I knew I had to act. No child should be sold like a piece of property, no matter how desperate the circumstances." Benjamin Crane laughed harshly. "And what do you propose to do about it, lady? These babies need feeding every few hours. They need constant care. Their father can't provide that and lead a wagon train at the same time." Temperance's eyes never left the infants. "I propose to care for them myself. I have milk enough, having recently lost my own child, and I have the means to provide for them." The crowd fell silent. Jeremiah studied the woman's face, searching for signs of deception or madness. What he saw instead was a deep, abiding sorrow mixed with fierce determination. "You're asking me to entrust my sons to a complete stranger," he said quietly. "Yes," Temperance replied without hesitation, "but I'm not asking you to give them away. I'm asking you to let me help raise them until you're in a position to care for them properly. Yourself." Fletcher lowered his hammer, clearly frustrated by the interruption. "This is highly irregular. We have buyers here ready to pay good money. Money cannot buy what these children truly need." Temperance said firmly, "They need love, stability, and the chance to know their father when he's ready to be one again." Mrs. Weatherby dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "The poor dear is right, you know. Separating a father from his children, especially after losing their mother, it's not natural." Jeremiah felt a stirring of hope for the first time since Constance's death. "What exactly are you proposing, Miss Goodwin?" "I propose to care for Ezekiel and Isaiah as if they were my own, but with the understanding that they will always know who their real father is. When we reach Oregon and you're settled, you can decide whether to take them back or allow me to continue raising them. In the meantime, they stay with their family name and their father's love." The merchant Goldberg scoffed. "And what do you get out of this arrangement? Surely you don't expect us to believe you're doing this out of pure charity." Temperance was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "I get the chance to be a mother again. I get the chance to save to innocent lives from being bartered away like cattle. And perhaps, if I'm fortunate, I get the chance to heal from my own losses by helping others heal from theirs." Jeremiah looked down at his sons, who had grown quiet in his arms. Little Ezekiel's tiny fist had wrapped around his father's finger, and Isaiah's dark eyes seemed to stare directly at him with an intensity that reminded him painfully of Constance. "You say you can feed them?" he asked. Double quotes, "Yes. My own child was born just 6 weeks ago. I have milk and all the necessary supplies, and you're willing to travel with us to Oregon. I was planning to go there anyway. I have a brother in Portland who's expecting me." Martha Pemberton stepped forward. "Jeremiah, this seems like a blessing sent from above. The woman appears capable and kindly, and the babies would stay close to you." But Cornelius Blackwood wasn't convinced. "We still can't afford to feed 2 extra mouths. And who's to say this stranger won't just disappear in the night with the children?" Temperance reached into her traveling bag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I have sufficient funds to pay for my share of supplies, and extra to contribute to the group's needs. As for disappearing, I give you my word as a Christian woman that I will not take these children from their father." She untied the pouch and poured several gold coins into her palm. The sight of the money caused several people to gasp. It was more wealth than most of them had seen in months. "Where did you get that?" demanded Crane suspiciously. "My late husband was a successful merchant. He left me well provided for, at least in terms of money. Unfortunately, Money cannot bring back the dead or heal a broken heart. Jeremiah made his decision. He stepped forward and gently placed one baby in Temperance's arms, then the other. "Miss Goodwin, I accept your offer, but I have conditions. Name them." "First, I want to spend time with my sons every day, even if it's just for a few minutes before bedtime. Second, they're to know that I'm their father from the beginning. Third, when we reach Oregon, we'll discuss permanent arrangements. And fourth, if at any time you change your mind or I feel you're not caring for them properly, they come back to me immediately." Temperance nodded solemnly. "I agree to all your terms. I swear on my husband's grave that I will treat Ezekiel and Isaiah as my own children, while respecting your rights as their father." The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling about the lost opportunity for profit, others expressing relief that the babies wouldn't be separated from their father. Fletcher packed up his auctioneer's equipment with obvious disappointment. As evening approached, Temperance set up her small tent near Jeremiah's wagon. She had brought a surprising amount of supplies for someone who claimed to be traveling alone, including a well-made cradle and plenty of baby clothes. Martha Pemberton helped her settle in. "You're doing a wonderful thing, dear. Those babies need a woman's touch." "I'm doing what any decent person would do," Temperance replied, gently rocking little Ezekiel as she prepared to feed him. Children are gifts from God, not commodities, to be sold. That first night, Jeremiah found himself drawn to Temperance's tent by the sound of soft humming. Through the canvas, he could see her silhouette as she cared for his sons. The sight filled him with a mixture of gratitude and profound sadness. This was how it should have been with Constance. Over the following days, the wagon train continued its journey westward. Temperance proved to be everything she had promised and more. She kept the babies clean, fed, and content. She sang to them in the evenings and made sure they were warm during the increasingly cold nights. Jeremiah visited every morning and evening, as agreed. At first, the encounters were awkward and formal, but gradually he began to appreciate not just Temperance's skill as a caregiver, but her wisdom and gentle nature. "You're a natural mother," he told her one evening as she handed him Isaiah for his nightly visit. "I had practice," she replied sadly. "My own little Thomas lived for 6 beautiful weeks before the fever took him. I'm sorry for your loss. I know how it feels to lose a child, though mine lived only long enough to draw their first breaths before their mother." They shared the comfortable silence of mutual grief. Both had experienced losses that most people couldn't understand. As the days passed, other members of the wagon train began to accept Temperance as one of their own. She helped tend to sick children, mended clothes, and contributed to the group's meals. Her gold coins proved useful when they needed to purchase supplies from traders along the trail. Martha Pemberton became particularly fond of her. "That woman is a blessing," she told her husband. "She's brought life back to our camp." Even Cornelius Blackwood, initially skeptical, had to admit that Temperance was pulling her weight and more. "I still don't understand why she's doing all this for strangers," he confided to his wife. "But I can't argue with the results." 2 weeks into their new arrangement, the wagon train faced its biggest challenge yet. A early winter storm struck with fierce winds and driving snow. Several wagons became mired in mud, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the barrels. During the worst of the storm, little Ezekiel developed a dangerous fever. Temperance worked through the night, using every remedy she knew to bring down his temperature. Jeremiah stayed with her, holding his son and helping however he could. "He's so small," Jeremiah whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't lose him too." "You won't," Temperance said firmly. "He's a fighter, just like his father." By morning, the fever had broken. Ezekiel was weak but breathing normally. Jeremiah looked at Temperance with tears in his eyes. "You saved his life." "We saved his life," she corrected. "He needed both of us." The storm had delayed their progress significantly. They were still several weeks from Oregon, and winter was settling in hard. Food supplies were running low, and several of the older travelers were showing signs of illness. It was during this difficult time that Temperance revealed another surprise. She approached Jeremiah with a serious expression. "I need to tell you something that might change your opinion of me." Jeremiah looked up from checking his wagon wheels. What is it? I haven't been completely honest about my past. Yes, I lost my husband and child. But there's more to the story. She took a deep breath. My husband wasn't just a merchant. He was involved in helping runaway slaves reach freedom. When he died, I inherited not just his money, but also his contacts and his mission. Jeremiah stared at her. You're saying you're part of the Underground Railroad? I was planning to retire from that life when I reached Oregon. But the skills I learned helping people escape difficult situations, well, they've served me well in caring for your sons. Why are you telling me this now? Temperance glanced toward her tent, where the babies were sleeping. Because I believe in honesty, especially when it comes to the people we care about. And because we may need to make some difficult decisions about our route if we're going to survive this winter. She pulled out a detailed map. I know of a route that's longer but safer. It goes through territory where I have contacts, people who could provide us with supplies and shelter. But it would mean deviating from the standard trail. Jeremiah studied the map carefully as the wagon train leader. He had to consider the safety of all 43 families. This route would add 2 weeks to our journey. Yes, but it would also increase our chances of survival. The people I know have cached supplies specifically for travelers in distress. That evening, Jeremiah called a meeting of all the adult travelers. He explained their situation honestly, the late season, the harsh weather, and the dwindling supplies. Then he presented Temperance's alternative route. How do we know we can trust this woman's contacts? Asked Benjamin Crane. For all we know, she could be leading us into a trap. Temperance stood up slowly. Mr. Crane, I understand your suspicion, but I've put my own life at risk to help your group. I've cared for children who aren't even mine, contributed my own money to our supplies, and now I'm offering information that could save all our lives. Martha Pemberton nodded vigorously. The woman's proven herself time and again. I say we listen to her. The debate continued for hours. Some families wanted to stick to the known trail, while others were willing to trust Temperance's judgment. In the end, it came down to a vote. The result was close, but the majority decided to follow the alternative route. The next morning, they turned southwest, following Temperance's directions. The weather remained harsh, but after 3 days of travel, they reached a small settlement that wasn't marked on any of their official maps. The settlement consisted of about 12 buildings and was home to a mixed group of freed slaves, Native Americans, and white settlers who had chosen to live together peacefully. The leader was a tall, dignified man named Samuel Freeman, who greeted Temperance like an old friend. Temperance Goodwin, he said with a broad smile. We heard about the loss of your family. I'm sorry for your troubles. Thank you, Samuel. These good people need shelter and supplies. Can you help them? Samuel looked over the bedraggled wagon train. Of course, we always help travelers, especially those recommended by friends. The settlement opened its doors to the wagon train. They provided hot meals, warm shelter, and medical care for those who needed it. Several of the travelers were surprised by the kindness shown by people they had been taught to fear or distrust. Cornelius Blackwood found himself sharing a meal with a former slave named Joseph, who told him stories of his journey to freedom. I never thought I'd sit at the same table as A. Blackwood began, then stopped himself. As a Negro, Joseph finished with a gentle smile. We're all just people trying to make our way in this world. Mr. Blackwood, the color of our skin doesn't change that. During their 3-day stay, Jeremiah spent more time with Temperance than ever before. She showed him around the settlement, explaining how the different groups worked together despite their differences. This is what I hope to find in Oregon, she said as they watched children of various backgrounds playing together. A place where people are judged by their character, rather than their circumstances. It's remarkable, Jeremiah agreed. I've never seen anything like it. That evening, as they prepared to continue their journey, Samuel pulled Temperance aside. Are you sure about this path you're taking? Raising another man's children, I mean. Temperance looked over at Jeremiah, who was holding both babies while talking to some of the other men. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Those children have given me a reason to live again. And their father, she was quiet for a moment. He's a good man who's been dealt a terrible hand, I think. I think we're helping each other heal." The wagon train left the settlement well supplied and in much better spirits. The alternative route proved to be exactly what Temperance had promised. Safer and more manageable despite the extra distance. As they traveled, Jeremiah found himself looking forward to his daily visits with the babies more and more. But, increasingly, he also looked forward to his conversations with Temperance. She was intelligent, kind, and had a strength of character that reminded him of his late wife, though in different ways. One evening, as they camped beside a frozen stream, Martha Pemberton made an observation to her husband. "Have you noticed how Jeremiah looks at Miss Goodwin when he thinks no one is watching?" "I've noticed," replied her husband, "and I've noticed how she looks at him too. Those two are falling in love, whether they admit it or not." Neither Jeremiah nor Temperance had spoken of their growing feelings, but the attraction was becoming obvious to everyone around them. They worked together seamlessly when caring for the twins, and their conversations had grown deeper and more personal over the weeks. The crisis came when they were still 2 weeks from Oregon. Little Isaiah developed a severe cough that quickly worsened. Despite Temperance's best efforts, the baby grew weaker each day. Dr. Whitman, the only person with medical training in their group, examined the infant and shook his head gravely. "I'm afraid there's not much we can do out here. The child needs proper medical care, warmth, and medicine we don't have." Jeremiah held his sick son and felt the familiar terror of losing another family member. "There has to be something." Temperance had been unusually quiet during the examination. Now she spoke up. "There is something, but it would mean another detour." She explained that there was a mission about a day's ride south of their position. The mission had a hospital and a doctor who specialized in treating children, but it would mean splitting the group. Someone would need to take Isaiah there while the rest of the wagon train continues on. "I'll take him," Jeremiah said immediately. "No," Temperance replied firmly. "These people need their leader. I'll take Isaiah to the mission while you continue. With the train, we can reunite in Oregon." The thought of being separated from both his son and Temperance filled Jeremiah with dread. "I won't let you go alone. It's the only way that makes sense," she insisted. "Isaiah needs immediate care, and these families need to reach Oregon before the weather gets worse." Martha Pemberton stepped forward. "I'll go with Temperance. 2 women traveling together will be safer than 1 woman alone." After much debate, it was decided that Temperance, Martha, and little Isaiah would ride to the mission while the rest of the wagon train continued toward Oregon. Jeremiah would take Ezekiel with him, as the healthier twin could better survive the continued journey. The separation was heartbreaking. As Temperance prepared to leave with the sick baby, Jeremiah pulled her aside. "I need to tell you something before you go." "What is it?" He struggled to find the words. "These past months, watching you care for my sons, getting to know you, I've come to care for you in ways I never expected after losing Constance." Temperance's eyes filled with tears. "Jeremiah, I know it's too soon, and I know this isn't the right time, but I had to tell you. In case something happens, I wanted you to know that you've brought light back into my life." She reached up and touched his face gently. "You've given me a family. Again when I thought I'd lost everything. Whatever happens, I want you to know that caring for your children has been the greatest joy of my life." They parted with promises to reunite in Oregon. Jeremiah watched until Temperance and Martha disappeared over the horizon, then turned back to his responsibilities as wagon train leader. Baby Ezekiel strapped to his chest. The final 2 weeks of the journey were the longest of Jeremiah's life. He cared for Ezekiel with help from the other women in the group, but every day he worried about Isaiah and Temperance. Had they reached the mission safely? Was his son recovering? Would he ever see Temperance again? When the wagon train finally reached the Oregon Territory, Jeremiah immediately began asking about the mission hospital. He learned that it was well known for its excellent care, which gave him hope. He established the wagon train's camp near Portland and made arrangements for the families to claim their land grants. But his heart wasn't in the work. Every day that passed without word from Temperance felt like an eternity. Then, on a crisp morning in late November, a rider approached the camp. It was Martha Pemberton, but she was alone. Jeremiah's heart sank. As he ran to meet her, "Where's Temperance? Where's Isaiah?" he demanded. Martha smiled through her tears. "They're both fine. Isaiah recovered completely after 5 days at the mission. Temperance wanted to come back immediately, but she felt she should stay to help other sick children at the hospital." Relief flooded through Jeremiah. "So they're both safe, very safe. And Jeremiah, there's something else you should know. Temperance asked me to give you this." Martha handed him a letter written in Temperance's careful handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened it and read, "My dearest Jeremiah, by the time you read this, you will know that Isaiah has recovered fully from his illness. The doctors at the mission were wonderful, and our son is now healthy and strong. I say our son because that is how I have come to think of both boys. Though I will always respect your rights as their father, I am staying at the mission for a few more weeks to help with other sick children, but my heart is with you and Ezekiel. I have had much time to think during Isaiah's recovery, and I have reached some conclusions about our future. I love you, Jeremiah Hawthorne. I love you with all my heart, and I love your sons as if they were born from my own body. If you will have me, I would like to be your wife and the mother of your children, not as a temporary arrangement, but as a permanent family built on love and commitment. I know this may seem forward for a woman to propose, but the frontier has taught me that life is too short and too precious to waste on convention. If you feel the same way, please come to the mission. If you do not, I will understand and will find another way to make my life in Oregon. With all my love, Temperance." Jeremiah read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. Then he looked up at Martha, with tears streaming down his face. "She wants to marry me. Of course she does, you fool. She's been in love with you for months. We all could see it." Without another word, Jeremiah gathered his supplies and baby Ezekiel and set out for the mission. The journey that had taken 2 days by wagon took him less than a day on horseback. He arrived at the mission just as the sun was setting. Through the window of the hospital, he could see Temperance holding baby Isaiah while feeding him. The sight of his family, whole and healthy, filled him with overwhelming joy. Temperance looked up as he entered the room, her face lit up with a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire building. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" he asked, taking Isaiah from her arms while keeping Ezekiel balanced on his other hip. "I hoped you would, but I wasn't sure. My letter was rather bold." Jeremiah set both babies in their cradle and took Temperance's hands in his. "It was perfect. And yes, I will marry you. I want nothing more than to make you my wife and to build a life together. With our sons, she repeated, smiling through her tears. I like the sound of that. They were married 3 days later in the mission chapel, with baby Ezekiel and Isaiah as their only witnesses besides the mission staff. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with more joy and love than many elaborate weddings. The missionary who performed the ceremony, an elderly man named Father Miguel, spoke about the nature of family. "Family is not always about blood," he said. "Sometimes it is about choice, about commitment, about the decision to love and care for one another, regardless of the circumstances that brought you together." After the wedding, Jeremiah and Temperance returned to Portland with their sons. They used Temperance's remaining gold to purchase a good piece of land near the river and built a modest but comfortable home. Jeremiah found work as a guide for new wagon trains, using his experience to help other families make the dangerous journey west. Temperance established a small school for the children of the growing community, teaching them to read and write. As the years passed, Ezekiel and Isaiah grew into strong, healthy boys who knew the story of their birth and their mother's sacrifice. They loved Temperance as their mother, but they also knew about Constance and honored her memory. The family was blessed with 2 more children, daughters they named Hope and Faith. The 4 children grew up together, and no one could have told which ones were born to Temperance and which were adopted. One evening, when the twins were about 10 years old, Isaiah asked his father about the day they were almost auctioned off. "Do you ever regret not selling us that day, Pa?" Jeremiah looked at his son, then at Temperance, who was mending clothes by the fireplace, while baby Faith slept in her arms. "Son, that day was the darkest of my life. But it led to the greatest blessing I could have imagined. Your mother, both of your mothers, gave me the greatest gifts possible. I regret nothing." Ezekiel, always the more thoughtful of the twins, looked at Temperance. "Ma, why did you help us when you didn't even know us?" Temperance set down her sewing and gathered all her children around her. "Because, my dear boy, sometimes God puts us exactly where we need to be, exactly when we need to be there. I needed a family, and you needed a mother. Your father needed someone to help him heal from his grief, and I needed someone to help me heal from mine." She looked around at her family, her heart full of contentment. "We found each other in the darkest moment, and we chose to build something beautiful together. That's what love does. It takes broken pieces and makes them whole again." Years later, when Jeremiah and Temperance were old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren, they would often talk about that day on the Nebraska prairie when their lives changed forever. They never forgot the lesson they learned about the power of love to transform tragedy into triumph, and about the unexpected ways that families can be formed. The auction that never happened became family legend, a story told and retold to remind each generation that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the greatest trials, and that love, in all its forms, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds and create beauty from the ashes of sorrow. In the end, what began as a desperate attempt to save two babies from an uncertain future became the foundation of a legacy of love that would endure for generations. The twins grew up to be fine men who honored both their birth mother's sacrifice and their adoptive mother's love, and they passed on the values of compassion, courage, and family loyalty to their own children. The small cemetery where Constance was buried in Nebraska was never forgotten. Every few years, the family would make the journey back to place flowers on her grave and tell her about the children she had given life to and the family that had grown from her sacrifice. In this way, she remained part of their story, not as a source of sadness, but as the first link in a chain of love that connected them all. Temperance lived to be 83 years old, long enough to see her sons become successful men, her daughters marry and have families of their own, and her grandchildren begin to have children of their own. On her deathbed, surrounded by the family she had chosen and who had chosen her, she whispered her final words to Jeremiah. "We did good, didn't we? We turned sorrow into joy." "Yes, my love," he replied, holding her hand as she slipped peacefully away. "We did very good indeed." Jeremiah followed her 3 years later, and they were buried side by side in the Portland Cemetery, their headstone reading simply, "Jeremiah and Temperance Hawthorne, beloved parents and grandparents, who proved that love makes a family." The auction that never happened had instead become a love story that lasted a lifetime, a testament to the truth that sometimes the most beautiful things in life grow from the most difficult circumstances, and that families are built not just by blood, but by the choices we make to love and care for one another. Now that you've watched the full story, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate it out of 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and ensure we're bringing you the kind of storytelling you truly enjoy.